Comments are on, or should be. Sorry I'm late. Me and Sammy got up early, about 5:30. Went for a walk at 6. Came back, settled in. Now we're going to take a minute to hang out with you guys. I know it's a weird topic, but we've talked about portals before. We've talked about trees and their symbolism in our history and our ancient lore, mythology, and even in the Bible, in Sumerian texts. Trees are important from back then all the way up to the Lord of the Rings and the trees that were in that story, and they actually picked up their roots and walked around. Pretty interesting stuff. I'm currently watching, it's called From on Prime. I really like the lead actors and actresses in the show. It's a really cool idea. They're in some type of purgatory type place, some type of in-between. And the trees there, gosh, I forget what he calls them, but they're magic trees or faraway trees or something like that he calls them. Because when you step into them, you go someplace else. But each one takes you to a different location. Now, we know in Scripture, we are also told about the Tree of Life. And that is, when you eat from the Tree of Life, you shall live eternally. And have your quote-unquote light or lighter body. We've talked about that as well, as far as resonance goes. So, for me, I wanted to take those serious topics we were digging into and kind of let them marinate in the back of my mind. Because I'm concerned, like I said, when anything trends and becomes mainstream, I'm concerned if that's a God, if that's a godly thing, a good thing, or if it's a deception or something nefarious. And I'm concerned that there's a honeypot of some type regarding the topic we were talking about yesterday. So I need to let that stuff kind of sit in the back of my mind and step away from it, and take a different look at it. So we're going to look at something this morning that's a little more light-hearted and that I find super interesting. We know also in Alice in Wonderland, she fell down the rabbit hole via a tree trunk, okay? There are stories way back. You can see the Grimm brothers. Now, what I Googled was trees as portals, folklore, and mythology. And trees are also really big, not in just fairy tales of the Grimm brothers. And you see, they take a pretty... We know that even Jack and the Beanstalk, he got magic beans, and it wasn't a tree per se, right? It was a beanstalk, but it was a giant beanstalk, right? And so that's kind of tree-like. And if you go to, I think it's... And it asks you right here, in Ireland, the Celtic traditions, it's very important in Beltane and all their rituals and stuff. Now, I want to say something because some people might say, well, we're Catholic, we this is some type of, magic stuff we shouldn't be looking at. Look, we are seekers of information, and we should take truth wherever it comes from. We are looking at this as a symbol and trying to find the commonalities in the folklore, the scriptural, the ancient text. We're trying to take the common thread and say, okay, what is the common thread here? Is there any truth to trees having some type of supernatural, preternatural application? Not just symbolically, but application. We know from the last several years, the world is a lot different than we were told. And we know that there are things out there that are supposed to be fiction and fictitious, and they are not. Now, this is, I'm not real great with the Norse. Yggdrasil. This is the world tree, the Norse legend of the world tree. This is their personal paradigm for how they think things are set up here. I actually think it's pretty close to truth. Again, you'll find these common threads around it, right? It's being held up by a tree trunk. It could actually look like a footstool. And you even have on this one the two pillars on either side. Now that comes into play here too. Now people might say from some of the other videos that trend and get really popular on YouTube, they might say that that has a Masonic inclination too. We're not looking at that right now. We're not saying what is good or evil. We're saying, okay, what do all these different elements mean when we find them in different places in historical writings, right? How many different cultures have similar ideas and concepts, right? We know, for example, that Noah's flood, it's not just in the Bible. There are writings about that in China. If you research it, all over the world, there are texts, from different cultures describing a worldwide cataclysm. And we know this. We know that one thing. We might not know the exact detail. Know that is pretty factual. Okay, nobody's here, but that's all right. It's a Saturday morning. I don't mind. All right. So this is the Norse. Let's look at that real quick. And again, I'm not great with the language, okay? But this again is a drawing, and it's the tree that can save the world, okay? And we'll look at that, but let's go back, because I want you to see a few things. And we've also talked about ash trees. Ash trees, personally for me, came up in my testimony back when this all began, and I felt like my circle of people, like, it's almost like every person spent time with me and quizzed me on certain things and asked me certain things. I felt like I was being secretly initiated into something. But then I kind of stopped everything because I'm like, wait a second, what's going on here? But I know that ash trees are significant. They were pointed out to me, and somebody explained to me the beetle, that the invasive beetle that was killing the ash trees. And if you know anything about the history of the ash trees, and again, this is where we get into a little bit of slippery territory. I'm not telling you to believe this. I'm not saying just because I show it or read it that I believe it or accept it as truth, okay? We're just, again, looking for that common thread and seeing what is out there and what is said about the trees and, what is in the ancient texts. Now, there are writings, Jewish writings and others, Sumerian writings, about God having a consort, about there being a male and feminine, a god and a goddess over us, that we have two parentals. I don't know how people feel about that. I'm not sure how I feel about that. I do vary on certain church doctrine, not in a big way, but I know that people can get very judgmental and point and say heretic or, this, that, or the other. And we're in a very dangerous time when people are doing that and they're wanting to push us to violence. And I'm saying, no, don't let that happen. Keep in control of your emotions, because right now they're trying to push us through our children. They're using the children to push us into a state where we are not thinking. You know how when you're in a state of fear and you panic, right? You make mistakes. This is why one reason that fear doesn't come from God, and you have to push it away. You have to overcome your fear. Most people are afraid of things in this life. But just like David faced Goliath, just because you have fear, the point is to overcome it, right? It's not to let it control you. When fear controls us, or any emotion, for example, the things going on with children right now, the laws that they're making and breaking, and Planned Parenthood and things like that, and, certain communities saying outright, we're coming after your children. It is obviously worrisome, and we should be concerned, and we should be vigilant in our communities with our families and our children, and we should watch over each other. But at the same time, we need to be well balanced and not allow our emotional attachment to, or investment, our emotional investment in our love for the children of our communities and our families, because they are our future. They are the hope for the future. We cannot allow that to instigate us into behaving in such a way as to where, like, fear and panic, you don't think about what you're doing. Anger can do the same thing. People react before they think, right? And before you know it, something happens and that can't be taken back or undone. So I think we need to be very careful and very mindful. That's why I said let's let that stuff kind of sit in the back burner for a while. Right now, I thought it was really cool. So the feminine aspect in some writings, her name was Ashera, and she was the consort of God, and she watched over the earth. She was like Mother Earth. And although they were a couple, or whatever you say, you know, the yin and the yang of everything. And the ash tree is symbolic of her, of the feminine, of the goddess, if you will. Again, I'm not saying I believe that. I'm saying we've looked into this and we know these things from picking up different materials, okay? That is what is said. I'm not telling you have to believe it. But again, we're looking at all these common threads, and I know that the ash trees are dying, and I've actually prayed for them. The Bible says not to touch a green thing until his children were all sealed, and so that makes me wonder too. But if we're in tribulation, I honestly thought that by mid-trib, I would no longer be here, although I don't believe in the rapture in the same way that other people do. But we're not going to get into that right now. Hey, 2 thumbs up. Thanks, guys. Somebody's watching. All right, so this is Tales from the Fairies. The ash tree is an important tree both in Nordic mythology and in Celtic mythology. Okay, so let's check that out real quick. Now, again, Alice in Wonderland, when she... I don't know if will the art still be there if I do that? I like you guys to be exposed to nice art, but sometimes this is more user-friendly when it has the black background. I know I do videos different than other people. I apologize if it's not as polished as it should be. I'm in a lot of pain today, and I'm a little frustrated with the cost of things. Like, you know, I had to get a uniform for work, or appropriate clothes, rather, and I'm going to need good shoes. Like, I go through shoes like mad because I walk so much. And now I'm on, like, cement all day. And I just can't believe the prices of things. Like, it's discouraging a little bit. And I got to thinking, you know, well, you know, as Christ followers, we're not supposed to have any attachment to physical things anyways. But I'm like, man, you know, if I want a decent pair of shoes that are going to be good for my knees and my back, it's going to be like $100. I'm going to have to rent my tennis shoes and make, like, payments on them. And so I was just laughing and getting a little frustrated at the state of things, at how you know, things have evolved from our materialistic type of, I don't want to say society, because not everybody is that way, right? But it is how the system is set up. And I don't think we should get too lost in the material, but at the same time, I do believe a little differently than most people. The earth is our home, and it says dust to dust, but which is made of the stars shall go back to the stars as well. So again, we have these different and almost conflicting contradictions in the same ancient text, in Sumerian language, in the Bible. There are these little riddles almost that you have to figure out. And trees are mentioned a lot in scripture and a lot in ancient lore. Now it says, why do you think you will find inside this tree a whole community of fairies, perhaps? This magic tree is called a banyan tree, and it is holy to the Hindus. When I found this door hidden under this magnificent tree, it made me wonder if perhaps it housed a troll or a hobbit, or perhaps is the entrance to a magic world. Pretty cool how things used to be. The Secret Garden, that's another one that came out before Alice in Wonderland, I think. And it's another one worth a read if you've never read it or saw the movie. Okay, no, we gotta go back here because I want to see. Come on. Now they're not... Where's the actual article that we started reading? Look how cool. And you have some mushrooms that have very good health benefits. I'm actually experimenting with that right now with myself. And they grow on the sides of trees and tree trunks. And moss grows on tree trunks. And now like that, you see the two? It is said that when you walk through an archway or two trees like that, and again, you have those two towers that we see all the time in Roman architecture, in our architecture here, the Roman copies that we have over here in the States. And you also see it in the Masonic images with the two pillars on either side. But it is said if you walk through those in some places that you will end up somewhere else. Okay? And there are these little places through the woods and stuff, and you wonder who built them, who put them there, who walked through here and said, you know, I'm going to go ahead and put a walkway here for everybody else that comes around, right? Now, I don't know why they didn't continue with what we were. See right there, why doesn't it go to that? I don't know why it doesn't do that. That's weird. Okay, what do trees symbolize in folklore? Trees and forests thus took on symbolic divine characteristics, or were seen to represent superlative forces such as courage, endurance, or immortality. See, and there you have the immortality again, much like if you eat from the Tree of Life, when we are allowed to partake, let's be positive and optimistic here, that we will have eternal life. They were the means of communication between worlds. Some societies made them into magical totems, and even Native Americans. You see, their totems are made out of tree trunks, right? And when they say I'm at the bottom of the totem, you know, in the hierarchy or whatever, that's literal with how they constructed their totems. And again, this is very interesting. We can't just look at another culture and say, oh, that's a demon. I know Native Americans and I know Spanish people who are Catholics, but they bring their culture into the Catholic, their faith, right, into the ritual of everything. And you have some people pointing and saying, well, that's witchcraft or Santeria or this, that, or the other. We have to understand that to divide culture and religion, two different things, and we all ritualistically, physically, right, walk out different rituals for, like, you might brush your teeth first thing in the morning and then take a shower. I might take a shower and then brush my teeth after I have my coffee, right? We're doing the same thing, but just in a different way. They proclaim and worship and praise the Creator. They believe in one Creator. They are converted to Catholicism, but they use different words. They have a different language, obviously. And again, so we can't always just point at something and say that's wicked or evil because we don't understand it, right? Because then that's like crying wolf. And then people on the outside look at us and say, those people are crazy. They think there's demons running around everywhere. We have to be logical in presenting things. And, you know, that's the tenet of Catholicism, is to be reasonable, right? And who's that author? Even the guy who wrote Narnia, and he ended up converting, like, as he was writing that story. Gosh, I always forget his name. That's horrible. And what's his story? The Reluctant Convert, I think, is what he called his book. And he talks about all that too as well. So we can't just point at something because we don't understand how they're acting out the ritual. They might be doing the same thing. They still believe in just one God at the top, right? But we all know there's a hierarchy. Now, some people will say, well, that's a pantheon. You believe in a pantheon, which is, you know, different quote-unquote little g gods ruling over different principalities. Well, that's the same thing. It might be different words, and people are looking at it from their chosen paradigm or the culture that they were brought up in, right? But if you look at it, it's the same thing. They're doing the same thing. They're talking about the same thing, but they're using their own language and life experience, which builds your culture, your personality, your life experience, and your geographical, demographical area. That's what builds a culture. So we have to understand that, you know, we can learn from these stories and these symbols, and we should not be afraid of words and symbols because they were all God's first, right? God spoke the world and everything into existence. God said, let there be light. There was light. So let's continue with the trees. I didn't mean to get off point there. Now, this one says, a fairy door is a magical portal between our world and the fairy realm, usually found at the base of a tree trunk or on a skirting board. Fairy doors can be used to help children with imaginative play and creative thinking. As a result, they can also help children deal with their worries and bad dreams. That's different. What is the tree archetype in mythology? This should be helpful, I hope. The Tree of Life with sacred animals feeding on fruit-bearing branches. Wow, there's a lot in that, packed in that statement. Sacred animals feeding on fruit-bearing branches. And can you imagine, like Adam just sitting in the garden with the animals and them talking to each other and understanding each other, right? Like we know our pets and we usually know what they need or want when they whine to us or give us a certain, lick or nudge or whatever yours does. But we can't actually speak the same language right now, right? So that's, again, it gets into a fantastical, magical type of thinking, but that's allegedly our history. And we get so caught up in the material and what's right in front of us right now that we forget that there are things all over, that we just have not seen or have not been exposed to yet. Okay, so the tree was associated with palaces and kingship because the king was seen as the link between the earthly and divine realms. Now, if you think of a king on his throne with his crown, right, just that image creates a triangle. And you have the king kind of at the top, right? And what did Christ say? I am a king, but my kingdom is not of this world, right? Meaning it's not of your system. It's not anything you rule over, right? And so if you think of these things and visualize them, you can see the symbology in them, okay? So it's a hierarchical archetype way of visualizing things in your mind so that you can have kind of an orderly view of how the world possibly works. And you might use different words. I might use different words, but we might sometimes be talking about the same thing. And that's why fellowship with different people of different cultures, ethnicities, religions and faiths, and different politics, that's why communication is important. It doesn't always have to lead to, just because somebody disagrees, it doesn't have to always lead to argument, right? Disagreement shouldn't always then equate to or lead to an argument. Now, through him, the gods blessed the earth with fertility, right? Now, and that is said in the Bible too. God gives you the ruler that you deserve. You get ruled over by what it is that you've earned or whatever at times. And so if you have a good king and he's godly and he's checking in with God and doing what he's supposed to be doing, things will go well for the villagers and his people and so on and so forth. But then you have someone like Solomon who got too involved with the demonic. Instead of ruling over them and keeping them in check, he started to believe then that all the power he had, quote unquote, came from himself, instead of recognizing, I'm not doing this on my own. This is God working through me, right? We have to have a place of humility in our walks. And I think that's key. And I know not everybody agrees with me, especially in this current climate that's in society. But if we want to have a hopeful society for the future and maybe live in harmony at sometime in the future, then we need to start communicating effectively and learning about different people a little more so that we're not instantly thinking just because someone's different, that means they're bad, evil, or, what have you. Just my opinion, doesn't mean I'm correct. So it says, what's the spiritual connection of trees? Trees help us become more aware of our connections with something larger than ourselves. In mythology, trees are sometimes portrayed as the abodes of nature spirits. We also see gnomes. Gnomes live in trees. And I think even Frog and Toad, in their stories, they might have lived in trees. So we even have a special word, dendrolatry, in reference to the way we worship trees. Okay, now that's getting a little too far, right? We don't want to worship the trees. We want to thank the one who made them for us, right? Let's see. They can symbolize love, gratitude, protection, and happiness. Much like in Lord of the Rings, they symbolize a type of protection over the forest and the beings that were innocent, right? That weren't involved in the fray, shall we say. And they rise. I know owls are associated with secret societies as well, and I'm not talking in that way. We're not looking at that right now. Um, Owls also have always been a symbol of wisdom. I don't know why exactly. We can look into it sometimes, but when I was a child, that's what we were taught, was that owls were the one word for them, things that were associated with owls were wisdom. What are two beliefs about fairy trees? Now, one of the legends is that is of a changeling, it's called. It's said that fairies or changelings would leave babies in tree trunks or next to trees, or in the top, in the branches of trees, or right down at the bottom there. They would leave them in the forest and they would cry. And of course, women who were mothers who were in the village that would hear them would go to them and try to help them or save them. And they would take them back to their homes. But then they had a changeling in their home who literally would suck the life essence then out of the people in the home. There's actually a few movies out like that right now on Prime. I've seen a couple of them. So again, you have these things always bubbling to the surface, much like Matt on QOC talked about how row, row, row your boat is just one of those things. Like, everybody knows that song. Why did it become so popular? Why is it ingrained in our childhoods? And honestly, it doesn't make sense. Why would you row your boat down the stream? Let the stream work for you. Don't do that work. It's already taking you downward. Why would you row unless you wanted to go up and against the current? Do you see what I mean? But yet it's ingrained in everything. He's right. It's always bubbling to the surface. And now you have the symbology of trees, right? It's always kind of coming around, and the talk of shapeshifters or changelings, beings that are superhuman almost. They look like us or can look like us, but something's a little different. Something's a little off, right? What does a fairy tree symbolize? Live under the hawthorn. Okay, so the hawthorn trees is symbolic for fairies. They are the guardians of the hawthorn trees, and so was treated with great respect and care. However, politely collecting hawthorn sprigs and flowers was allowed, especially by brides who wore hawthorn blossoms in their hair or bouquets to symbol their union of love. Okay. And yeah, trees are really big in paganism too, and on Beltane and those types of things. And again, people will look at that and say that's wicked, but some of that is part of culture and not necessarily faith. We have to learn to, again, separate those a little bit better. The girls, I believe, that are coming of age or teenagers or something, are going to have their first date. They will go around the tree with a ribbon and tie the ribbon in the tree. And then when you get married, I think you do something like that as well. And they do what's called a hand fasting, and they bind the hand of the groom and the bride together, and that's supposed to symbolize their union, right? So again, we have to be really careful. We don't want to just, the Bible does say a lot of people will be offended in the end days, so sometimes that can't be avoided. But we don't want to outright just seek to offend people. And I think there are a lot of, I'll be blunt, I think there are a lot of instigators on YouTube and in the media at this point, and they are big personalities and people follow them. And the comment sections are rife with just very anti-human, I would have to say wicked and demonic, and just outright non-human behaviors and treatments of each other. So on this channel, everybody is welcome. We're not going to shun anybody. That's not the way to move forward, I don't think. And again, the only people I would willingly or knowingly shun is people that I knew for a fact had done something wicked and hadn't repented of that, because a part of repentance is having contrition and being penitent. So then, if you know you're a criminal, you should probably turn yourself in, or at least, try to make that right somehow. If you stole something from somebody, give it back to them, and I'm not talking about like living in a police state. I'm saying being accountable for our own selves, right? And what we're doing. Now, again, abuse is a whole different thing. people don't get into a relationship thinking, gee, I want to do this and I want to be abused for 20 years and, then I want to be estranged from everybody. I don't think people put themselves in positions like that, and I think everybody at certain times in their life needs help. So again, I don't shun people on this channel. If they're a different religion, I would like to know about that, and I want to talk about it, and I want to know what their beliefs are. And I think we should be respectful of that, unless it's something barbaric, like, still thinking you have to throw 100 virgins into a volcano every 100 years or whatever. And that's just an example. That doesn't mean, again, I believe that or anything. Thanks, whoever that is, for hanging out with me. Okay, so it is a place beyond the safety and familiarity of the town or village. It represents the unknown where anything can happen. It is outside of normal experience and is both a magical realm and a place of danger. And so that's the National Library of Scotland. That's how they say forests are symbolized in fairy lore. What is the Fey realm called? Fairyland, Fairy, Scottish Elfame, CF Old Norse, what's that word? Alfheimer. In English and Scottish folklore is the fabulous land or abode of fairies or fays. Old French fairy, early modern English fairy, referred to an illusion or enchantment. Now that's key right there. You have what again? Illusion. And we've been talking, I don't know if you noticed, but we're talking about different things too, because we were talking about Alice in Wonderland a bit from a different angle than I think most YouTubers have looked at it. And you have the tree where she fell in the tree trunk, and that's how she fell down the rabbit hole, right? And then you have the top hat, which the Mad Hatter wears, right? What does that symbolize? And it symbolizes illusion, and magicians wear the top hats, and they seem to be a magical space, right? A never-ending space, because they keep pulling things out of that magic hat. And so it's a symbol of illusion. So we're looking at these different items and symbols from Alice in Wonderland, from the Wizard of Oz, with the red shoes and everything, trying to figure out why these things stick and why they keep popping up in different writings, different books, different lores, different stories, different testimonies, even from people today in places like Reddit. And they talk a lot about these things over there. That's the one thing I like Reddit for. Everything else is kind of caca, but that I like. So now, what is portal magic? Well, okay, this is portal spell. Should we read that? A short magic ritual that creates an interdimensional or extra-dimensional pathway between two geographic points quickly. Now, it is said that some saints are able or were able to do what is called bilocation. They lived and dwelled in one place, but sometimes somebody would need them or would be praying, and they would just suddenly, their spirit, it would look like them, but it would be, what do I say? Like transparent, like a ghost. I don't know. I think that's how it works. And so they would go to somebody, right, in another country or whatever. They would have that experience, and people wrote about this all the time with particular saints. I think it happened with Padre Pio, that he ended up going somewhere else, helping someone who had been praying. And he just knew that someone needed him and thought of it, or they thought of whatever, and God gave him that impression, and suddenly he was in that person's room. And that's called bilocation. Now, that is what portals are allegedly for, right? Now, if you read the Book of Enoch, and if you read the Bible, I think it's Ezekiel, certain prophets, there are certain instances where they're getting from one place to another, and they talk about things like their time saver was 6 horses or something like that. It gets kind of weird. And if you think of it, that's how we talk about engines today. How much horsepower does that have? And a car or a vehicle is a time saver because you get from one place to another in a shorter amount of time than if you walked with your own 2 feet. So again, how long ago did these events in the Bible occur? And if it was on parchment and paper, how did they find it buried in the sand and it wasn't just destroyed? And the Sumerians, they put everything in stone, and so did the Egyptians. They put things all their, what do I want to call it? Cultural information for the future generations, they etched all of that in stone. And I think that's a very wise thing to do. It's much better than parchments and paper. And it surprises me, again, this is why we have to ask questions, right? Blind faith can be dangerous. I have blind faith in God. I know there's a creator just because I know. Nobody had to tell me that. I've just always known that. That's just how my connection with whatever it is that made me with my maker. But yeah, anyways, sorry, I was getting a little off there. So, certain saints have been said to bilocate, and sometimes this happens through portals, and I think it was Joel or Amos that fell asleep. We talked about this before, that fell asleep on a gemstone, and then he ended up having a vision and being transported to directly in front of the throne of God. And then God said he would etch the names of the 12 tribes into 12 gemstones, and that they would be above the doorway to the New Jerusalem. Again, I'll tell you, people who have gemstones or have like a birthstone that they wear in their ears or on their finger, that is not witchcraft. And I don't want to say I've argued because I've been as respectful. I think I've been really respectful about it. But if we look in the Old Testament and we say we believe the Bible and we see these people with these gemstones and God telling Aaron and Moses to fabricate a vest with the 12 gemstones so that his light would not destroy, when you approach God, you have to approach in a certain way because no one can see his face and live. So you have gemstones and trees and time-saving 6-horse-powered vehicles, chariots. That's the word it's used, chariot. It's a 6-horse chariot. You have these words that are being used that are very similar to things that we have today. So you have to ask yourself, what does that mean then? Does that mean that everything else in here is true as well? But does that mean our time is off? Has it really been 2,000 years since all these things happened? These are questions that we should ask. It's not a crime to ask questions, and it's not heretical either. What is a tree spirit called? A dryad, also called a hamadryad. In Greek mythology, a nymph. Most people know that. We studied Greek mythology in high school. We did courses on it. I don't know why Greek mythology. I guess because it's such a big part of everybody's history. All roads lead to Rome and all that. And not anyone else's. I'm not sure why. So a nymph or nature spirit who lives in trees and takes the form of a beautiful young woman. Dryads were originally the spirits of oak trees. So you see, each tree also has its own, well, we'll talk like principalities and powers and demons and domains. Each tree has its own domain. Again, you see this hierarchy that's visible in almost every culture, right? In every group, there is some type, or every paradigm of every culture, there is some type of hierarchy set up. And again, some people will say, well, that means you believe in, you're a pantheon. I'm just making observations. We cannot get hung up on words, okay? Because they've changed the definitions and meanings of them. And that's why we dig into the etymology of words and we study about what happened. And how that word and the definition evolved to where it is today. And again, we've talked about this, suffer not a witch to live. But then you have the 10 Commandments to say, thou shalt not kill. Well, I don't think a witch was the same thing that, they're saying today witches are the ones who plays with crystals and gemstones. I don't think that's true. Honestly, I kind of rely on fairy tales and the lore and the mythology in almost every culture, in the lore and the historical texts, whatever you want to call them, mythology, lore, folklore, all of it. Witches in fairy tales were always cannibals. They were dangerous to children. They liked to eat children. Look at Hansel and Gretel. Like that's not for the light of heart, right? How much truth is in these stories? And then now you know that that's That's also, if you dig deep enough, you can find that in certain religions about cannibalism. And India is very open about it. There's videos right on YouTube about cannibalistic Indian gurus, how they become a guru and putting that into their body and committing that abomination. I do not know. But again, just because something makes us uncomfortable doesn't mean we can't know that it's there, right? If you know it's there, then you can be cautious and you can be vigilant over your family and your children and all of that. But again, we see this hierarchy. Now, the ash tree, again. So the ash tree, what does this say? Fraxinus excelsior. Is that the Latin name for it? In Scandinavian mythology, the ash tree was known as Yggdrasil, the tree of the world, as the giant ash tree that linked and sheltered all the worlds. It was also known as the tree of rebirth and healing, and to come into contact with it meant regeneration or rebirth. Now, here's what I want to mention about the Tree of Life, because here you see it again, tree of the world, Tree of Life. You see this important tree in almost every culture, in almost every beginning story, you hear about a Tree of Life. Now let's think about this for a second, because the Yggdrasil, I showed you a picture of that. Now it means rebirth. Let's look at that paradigm again. Let's see if they have a picture of it here. Yeah, I know. Okay. What is that one? Blackthorn was associated with witchcraft. It is said that witches' wands and staffs were made using blackthorn wood. That's funny, and on YouTube they tell you it's Hollywood. Blackthorn has long been considered a magical tree. In Celtic mythology, it was considered to be a home to the fairies. Oh, you can make sloe... What? When to pick sloes and how to make sloe gin. Huh. Elder, Sambucus nigra. It was believed that if you planted elder close to your house, it would keep the devil away. That's crazy. I got some of that out there. Elder was once regarded as the most magically powerful of plants. Folklore surrounding the elder is wide and often conflicting. It was thought that if you burned elder wood, you would see the devil, but if you planted one by your house, it would keep the devil at bay. Apparently, it could charm away warts and vermin. See, though, that's they say it conflicts right there, but that's much like they say hair of the dog that bit you is what cures you. That's how you make a what am I trying? I don't want to use that word. If somebody is bitten by a venomous snake or somebody gets sick, you can make the cure out of the ailment, right? You see this with diseases and shots and things like that. I hope you know what I'm talking about there. Anyways, you see that is actually a thing. In Denmark, the tree was associated with magic. A dryad called the Elder Tree Mother was supposed to live in its branches. If you wanted to cut the tree to make furniture from its wood, the Elder Tree Mother must be asked permission first. If she wasn't, you ran the risk that she'd follow you and haunt you. Elder's habit of growing on wasteland, rubbish tips, and cemeteries has earned it both respect and dislike. In the Middle Ages, it was claimed to be the tree on which Judas hung himself. Wow, that's something, ain't it? Now, elderberry is what you take. I'm not a doctor. This is not medical advice. But it is said in the lore that elderberry can help your immune system. Now, you're going to get mad at me maybe, but I want to go back to what we were reading about the Tree of Life real quick. The Tree of the World, the Yggdrasil. Now, it was also known as the Tree of Rebirth and Healing. I want to go up here. And if anyone missed that earlier, I'm going to show you again. Now, this is the Yggdrasil. It's a Norse concept. It is their vision or envisionment of what our world looks like, how it's comprised, and how it shelters different parts of the world. Now, if you look at it as a hierarchy, okay, the lowest or bottom rung would be what? Where the lower level life forms would dwell, like those of darkness and heavier dark frequencies, right? They would be at the lower levels, like demons. Humans would be a little higher than that. Then you would have the angels above them or whatever, and then fairies and all that. I'm not quite sure how that fits in or what they actually are, so I'm not going to say, but I'm trying to help you envision how a hierarchy in this kind of system would work. And so could it then be thought that, for example, every time you were to ascend, you would literally go up a level? Is this something we physically need to do and find? Is the Bible also a map? I think it is. I've had this idea for a while now, and I've looked at a lot of different verses, and I do believe that the Bible is a map. I believe it can lead us to the Tree of Life and to the gates to the Garden of Eden. I know that's a pretty bold claim to make, but I'm going to do my best to prove it. I don't know if I will or I can, but I'm going to attempt that. But you see how their concept of how it's set up in our world, okay? And that's why I think talking about like ascension and where we go after this, or you know, the veil that's keeping our loved ones separated from us, you know, how does that fall down? Where does that come in, right? This is again the Norse concept. I'm just trying to look for a really good graphic here. Okay, so these would be the different worlds held by the tree, and it looks like they're each held in a firmament. There's the rainbow bridge. And that's funny because we're always told, where's the pot of gold? At the end of the rainbow. How do you get there? You walk on the rainbow, right? And that picture, again, that resonates through a lot of fairy tales and a lot of children's stories as well. I remember that. Lucky Charms cereal, right? This is interesting. I find this very interesting. Okay, so we have Middleland. I think that's where we would be. There's the realm of the elves back there. Land of Raging Fire, Rainbow Bridge, Vanaheim, realm of the Vanir, realm of the forest giants. Okay, so they're separated from everyone. That'd be a good thing. Ah, look at that word. Land of the ice and mist. Read it. Niflheim. It's very close to Nephilim. There's Hell, realm of the dead. And what is that? Svart Alfheim, realm of the dwarves. Okay, now I do believe there's Asgard, realm of the Aesir. And there is talk about, okay, so how do you get out of hell? Is hell permanent? Can you get out of there? There are a lot of different ideas about that. Christ went to hell for 3 days, and he rose again. He was resurrected. So, Christ was hung on a tree. Judas hung himself on a tree. Celtic Tree of Life, portal to invisible worlds and source of, let's see. I like to look around a little bit. I don't like to go to the first link that pops up. And I like older stuff. Celtic Tree of Life, portal to invisible worlds and source of sacred knowledge. Ancient pages, Celtic Tree of Life, portal to... Why is that doubled? Okay. There we go. Sacred knowledge guarded by the most enlightened ones. And it is said that the gates to the Garden of Eden, is guarded by angels, by, I think it's seraphim. Celts who had a unique relationship with nature believe that animals, plants, and trees possessed a spiritual essence. I believe that too. They have life, right? They are given life, so they have some type of essence going on in there. Under certain circumstances, humans could establish contact with beings from other invisible realms. The concept of unity was a vital and overarching element of the Celtic metaphysic. That's cool. A lot of people have a concept of the collective or some type of thing. I'm not really down with the singularity concept, but I do believe we are each a unique part of the body. I know people believe that we should all just like meld into one thing. I'm not really down with that idea. I don't know where that comes from, to be honest. I don't know why people would want to go backwards. I don't think that's our destination. I don't think that's what we're meant to be focusing on. I think we should be refined and spiritually evolving. And there are things that we should be able to do for ourselves at this point, like healing and like putting proper, appropriate, good nourishment into our bodies and giving it the proper knowledge and images through our eyes and our ear gates. Not everything has to be about I don't know, our society, it just feels really sick right now. You can't look at anything without there being some type of sensuality to it. So I'm trying to keep things pretty innocent at this point, because I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And it's sad because people like me, this is why I don't watch Pockets anymore, talk about, women who are older, who still like fairy tales and who act like, teenagers or what have you. Listen, some of us are just tired of constantly being bombarded with nudity, and nudity can be art. I'm really accepting of that because I'm an artist and I love art. I'm talking about disrespectful, objectifying nudity. It's everywhere. And that's all people talk about. Now they're relating their identity to just their preference in, sensually speaking. And I feel like I want to be a channel that's kind of a refuge from stuff like that. I don't want us to have to be looking at wickedness and darkness all the time. Yes, there are certain things we have to talk about, like yesterday. Again, I think we need to be cautious and not let our emotions carry us away, because the people behind these agendas are really trying to instigate us to some type of civil war. And I say no. I say peacefully resist. I'm not going to be a part of their plan. I don't want to cooperate with any of that. So I hope this is a place where you come for a little harmony and maybe some magical fairy dust added to your day, just so you can get maybe away from the grind and the smog of the city, or the bustling and the busyness of your house and family, and just sit down and have a cup of coffee with me and learn with me, and learn about new things and other cultures maybe, so that we can better know our neighbors, because we are all neighbors and we should be loving to each other. Are we that way all the time? No. Am I that way all the time? Absolutely not. But it's what we should strive for, right? We should still strive. And that's what I don't like about the idea that Christ did all the work. You can't be a piece of crap person and expect God's going to resurrect you just because you say you believe. If you really believe, then you change your behavior and you act in a certain way. And this is what I hope this channel can be, where everybody is welcome, where nobody is hating on another person, and we're all just kind of learning together and catching up on things maybe that we should have known for a long time but didn't, So they believe, now this is really cool, the Celtic Tree of Life is often depicted showing the branches reaching skyward and the roots spreading out into the earth below, symbolizing the Druid belief in the link between the heaven and earth. Stronghold here. Let's talk about this real quick. Pagan Irish people are not the same as Catholic Irish people. I just want to make that distinction, okay? And it is said that Druids used to participate in human sacrifice. I don't know if that's still true. I hope not. I hope that we're evolved enough to understand that we don't need to do things like that, and we shouldn't let demonic forces instigate us to things like that. But anyways, the Celtic Tree of Life also comes into play in Christian Irish culture. You have to understand, again, this is culture, okay? I know a lot of Irish Catholics, a lot of Irish Christians. They were really subjugated. They were the first slaves over here in America. I'm so glad to see other people actually talking about that finally. And they were treated horrendously. And they have like their symbols, right? And their ropes. And everybody, again, wants to give these types of symbols and things bad meanings. They're not bad or good, right? It's a part of their culture. It doesn't mean just because somebody wears a symbol that they're wicked. Sometimes they blend their culture with their faith. And that's what you see in some Irish Christians and Catholics, right? I wear a Tree of Life necklace. It's in the Bible. It's written of, right? But they might wear a Tree of Life necklace that's a Celtic rope, which I think is really cool. I think they're beautiful. And I love that artwork. I don't like when computers do artwork. I like when real people actually put effort into it and draw things. Anyways, So the Druid belief is that it was a link between heaven and earth, the branches reaching skyward and the roots going down, right? And that's how they believed we were kind of connected that way. Most civilizations of Mesoamerica believed the Kiba tree was mighty. Mixtec, Aztec, Maya, and other cultures consider this tree sacred. The Ceiba is a gigantic tree of life in Maya religion and cosmology, and the point of beginning where the world came into existence. It was the Mesoamerican view of the Tree of Life. You see, so this is beautiful. It's other cultures, but they believe something that's very similar and in scripture, okay? And it's very hard for Americans because most of us at this point, we're mutts. We don't even know what our nationality is, a lot of us. So it's good to learn these things because we are all what built America, you know, and we all have either Italian, Irish, Jewish ancestors, Indian ancestors, Chinese, Japanese ancestors, Korean ancestors who originally came over here and brought their cultures into America. And that's why they call it a melting pot. And that's why you see all these different cultures trying to live side by side. Now, is that what the American experiment was, to see if we could all live peacefully and in harmony side by side, even though we were so different? It would be awesome if we were successful, whether it was an experiment or not, and just respectful of each other's beliefs. Okay, so the Kalpa tree, often mentioned in Sanskrit literature, is believed to be a wishing tree, but it was also thought that it produced the fruit that nourished the first men. I want to see what that looks like. What, show us? Oh, that's pretty. Get out of here. Wow, that's the whole name is the Kalpa Vrishka, is a unique tree, a divine tree, a celestial tree, or a spiritual tree. Look how big that is. That's awesome. I like that. Okay, please don't spam me to death. Oh, where'd we go? Uh-oh. Uh-oh, maybe I shouldn't have done that. Sorry, guys. The Celtic Tree of Life is connected to the world of spirits. That's one of their belief systems. Although the oak was considered the most sacred, the ancient Celts clarified that every tree was blessed and had magical properties. Again, so you have this order and division, right? There is no division in the kingdom of God. What does that mean? That means we are all brothers and sisters because we're all made in the image of God. However, God did divide us in cultures. It talks about that in Genesis, and he did divide the languages. This is all spoken of. Now, was it supposed to remain that way, or are we supposed to be evolving as a people, as a species, and as a spirit? What do you got? I mean, I hope you guys comment once the video is posted. I know my comments are wonky and they don't always work, but I definitely want to hear what your thoughts are on a lot of these topics, of course. So we know that trees are regarded as sources of wisdom, for healing. They represent life. And we know that each tree has its own quote-unquote dominion or principality that it is quote-unquote over. So again, you see this division that is orderly. It's an orderly division. Now, it doesn't mean that we cannot trade with each other. It does not mean that we should not respect each other. It does not mean that we cannot marry into each other's cultures if we have some awareness of that culture and knowledge and learn about that culture. But that's the important thing, is understanding that, you know, we should respect each other's cultures still, and we shouldn't be pushing our beliefs so hard at one another. The best way to get somebody to convert, I mean, if that's what you're after, is to represent your belief system in the best way possible and to be a good rep for your chosen faith, you know? And I wasn't for a long time. My story is definitely a cautionary tale, but my testimony is pretty amazing because God is good and God gives us all the grace that we need. I'm not saying to go out there and willfully and knowingly, you know, transgress. That's not what I'm saying. So don't take it to that extreme, please. Okay, so I'm going to cut this one out. It's been on for a little bit now. But what I'm going to do, I think, is pull up some more information about the trees. And we can look into which tree represents what. Because we started this, and I wish this girl still watched the channel. I didn't know I was going to lose all my subs when I hit everything. But she was talking about a plant that was invasive to North America, and it was in England and Asia first. It looks like a ragweed, but in like lore and stories, it was whispered about, it was rumored to have some type of transporting or portal-like abilities to the buildings that it was around. Like if it was growing around a building and you walked in that building, it might transport you somewhere else. So we're going to look at each different tree family and see what they represent. I had pulled this up and I saw something in Reddit that looked really cool. The Devil's Tree, a portal to Hades. Oh, I think we looked at that. Yeah, it's not. If I find it, I will read it to you guys. But somebody was talking about a very interesting experience with a tree in Reddit. So I will try to find that. But yeah, what we'll do next as far as the trees go is we will see what each tree represents, what its quote unquote magical property is, in an effort to learn more. And because, again, this is something that is in pop culture right now. It's coming back around. So we have to ask ourselves, why do these things keep coming back around? Yeah, and what truth is there in these quote-unquote myths and legends? All right, guys, I hope you have a blessed day. Watch for a couple of shorter videos, uploads or whatever. I had a couple insights on a few things that I wanted to bring up, but they're not going to be super long. Let me know how you're doing. I miss you guys. It's been a long week, and I'm really hoping this weekend that I am going to make time to go over to the other channel that I just started, Striving to be a Saint, and reading some of The Dark Night of the Soul by St. John of the Cross, and doing a face-to-face video talking about fasting. Okay, so anyone who's interested in that or talking about we'll call it nutrition. Again, I'll have the disclaimers up over there. I'm not a doctor and all that. But we will talk about different people's experiences with putting different things in their bodies and why a lot of the saints abstained from eating animals. All right, guys. Whatever, if that stuff interests you, please comment below. Let me know. And we'll talk again soon.